Hello, Everybody Loves Raymond family. We are live. It is a Sunday. We are talking to Everybody Loves Raymond. We will be joined by Ken Levine very shortly. Hello, Teresa. Hello, Gil. Hello, Peter. Hello, Karen. Oh, wow, that's a record right there. Hello, Sir Ken.
Hello there.
Plugging in a microphone.
Great. All right, Ken, at the beginning, hello, Ray. So this is the fastest any guest has ever joined, which congratulations. It's freezing in Chicago. Yes, Teresa, I'm sure it's not what it is in Los Angeles, which is, I think it's a frigid 72. What is it, would you say, Ken?
Yeah, no, it's 72. Yeah, I got my parka on.
Yeah, I know it dips to the 60s and in the in the 50s, and it's just
Well, you don't go out. You don't go out when that happens.
It's very uncomfortable. Hello, Leo. Freezing rain in Toronto. See, now we feel guilty because even though Ken and I no guilt. By the way, Ken, somebody saying they enjoyed you when you were an announcer for the Seattle Mariners.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
I miss it.
Damp and wet in Plymouth. Okay, so let me just paint a little big picture here. This is Tom Caltabiano. For those of you who've never seen me, I was a writer on Everybody Loves Raymond, and I know Ray from way before Everybody Loves Raymond doing stand-up back in New York. We're talking to Ken Levine. Ken Levine is a big-time writer, director, who directed 3 episodes of Everybody Loves Raymond, but as important, if not more, was his storied career, which is not over, but MASH, Cheers, Frasier, a bunch of other ones that I don't want to bore people with, and most important, perhaps most recently, a published cartoonist in the New Yorker magazine. Is that correct, Ken?
That's correct. It's in this week's issue. One of my cartoons is in this week's issue, yeah.
Okay, so that tells us you're not a lowbrow, knuckle-dragging comedy writer like we see in an Aaron Sorkin production.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
So what I wanted to do, Ken, is we have so much to cover, and these fans, I think one of the things that I mentioned almost too much was that when I read Desi Arnaz's book and Jess Oppenheimer's book, who's the creator, I thought, oh, I wish everyone on I Love Lucy, everybody on I Love Lucy, had written the book, because they're all gone now, and as you know, it takes a big team to make a show work. Of course, the stars, and the way I liken it, the stars get the publicity. It's kind of like the Apollo moonshots. You knew 3 people who went to the moon, but there's like 30,000 people behind the scenes that the astronauts know.
That's a great analogy.
Thank you, Ken. Well, one of my favorite movies, and I don't even know where you feel on this, but one of my favorite books was The Right Stuff because of Tom Wolfe's prose and his ability to analyze characters. And so the movie, it pales compared to the book, as most movies do. But that aspect is you have this team of people behind something, and the high profile, the audience only knows of these few people. So it applies to sitcoms. And usually the actor recognizes that. Sometimes the actor is like, I did it all myself and these people hold me back. But those are few and far between. So what prompted me to have you visit this time is I saw Being the Ricardos. And I was like, oh. And again, a lot of people didn't see the movie. So I don't want to bore our audience. I want to talk about Everyone's Raymond. But I thought it's so odd, if for those of you that did watch the movie, the characterization of the comedy writer. So, Ken, let's jump right into that. Your feeling of watching Being the Ricardos.
Well, first of all, I should say I'm a very big fan of Aaron Sorkin's work. I love The West Wing. Once Trump got out of office, I felt safe to re-binge it without slitting my wrists. And it's like I loved American President. I loved Social Network. He writes beautifully, but the one thing that he has trouble writing, and people who have worked with him have said this on numerous occasions, is he can't write comedy. And it drives him crazy. I don't know why. The stuff he writes gets Oscars. The stuff we write gets 2-cent residuals. I don't know why he gives a crap, but he apparently does. And for whatever reason, whatever passive aggressive reason, he takes every opportunity he can to diminish comedy writers and their roles. And you saw this originally when he had that series on NBC a few years ago, Studio 60 from Sunset Strip, whatever. And it was the same thing where the comedy writers were just punching bags. And I was surprised and disappointed because I was really looking forward to this movie. I was very surprised and disappointed to see that he does the exact same thing in Being the Ricardos, that the two writers who, by the way, worked for Lucy for 50 years, so they couldn't have hated her that much, and she couldn't have thought they were that crappy to work with for 50 years, but he just takes every opportunity to tear down the comedy writers, even to the point where they tear each other down, where one of them says, after the Bill Frawley character says something amusing, and the character playing Madeline Pugh Jr. Turns to Bob Carroll and says, "Boy, that's funnier than anything you ever wrote."
Yeah.
Like, they're partners.
So
It's like
yeah,
they would never do that, especially in a public setting.
yeah. So I think just to jump in for a second, only because I have the benefit of having read Madeline's book, which was co-written with her writing partner, and reading the Desi book and the Jess Oppenheimer book. There's two aspects of the movie. So I don't want to be of a movie, let's say. For example, in the movie The Right Stuff, the astronauts, John Glenn hated that movie. Okay, that movie moved me and I loved it. You and I, as people that have been on shows, we're going to go, because everything you're saying is 100% accurate. The three writers, Jess Oppenheimer and Bob and Madeline, were on My Favorite Husband before I Love Lucy, and they helped bring I Love Lucy to life. So there's the movie for the person that doesn't know comedy writing, doesn't even know I Love Lucy. They're just watching the movie. Okay, so that you have to watch. And I think about, if you've ever seen the movie Whiplash. Okay, I saw the movie Whiplash. I loved it. But my friend, who's a professional drummer, not only hated it, but was angry about it, because he's like, nobody acts that way in the music business. No one. And bizarrely, the J.K. Simmons character is very much like the good friend I'm talking about's real personality. So you have to look at stuff as, this is a standalone movie if somebody watched it on a desert island. Then there's the, how does it play against reality? Because like the JFK movie, you go, oh, well, there was definitely a conspiracy, and back to and all this, and you go, that's the truth. The Oliver Stone's thing, right, where what you're talking about, which I didn't discuss it with you, but I watched the movie and I go, a couple things. They would never take shots at each other. These people really loved each other. The writers I'm talking about, and Lucy couldn't thank her writers enough throughout. And when you watch Being the Ricardos, you sit there and go, oh, the comedy writers keep getting in the way of writing comedy. They're very bad at comedy. And the director is terrible, even worse than the comedy writer. So you have these three bumbling people, and Lucy, who was a genius, is portrayed as being the only one that can pull them out of this doldrum, being carried the weight of the comedy writer. So in that regard, it takes us out, you and I out, because we go, this doesn't happen. And I think, because I was talking to Phil and Ray about this, and now I want to hear your thing, because you have a lot more breadth of experience. When you have a well-oiled machine like an Everett Raymond, you have this creative push where everybody's free to create and you can fail and succeed. But if Ken makes a suggestion and it fails, they don't go, that's it, Ken, you're done. Forget it. That was a stupid suggestion. That's not the way to foster the creative environment. And so for you, you have seen stars who are nightmare. You don't have to name names, but even then, even in the worst case scenario, you're back in the writer's room, maybe laughing even harder than ever.
Yes, that's true, because as writers, it's a way of letting off steam, and I've always said that, you know, even on the worst day, on the worst show that I worked on, that I laughed a lot. And how many jobs can you say that? Okay, I mean, think back to your job, you know, watching this. How many times have you had a belly laugh at work in the last week? And that again is when shows are going poorly. When shows are going well and they're very collaborative, it's really fun. You're doing a comedy. There's a joy to it, you know. And as writers, you go down to the stage and you take delight in seeing what the actors do and what they bring to it, and they take delight in, oh my God, look at that joke didn't work yesterday, and look at this new joke, it's a killer. Thank you. You know, and it's a very collaborative situation. And like I say, you know, you're not doing Clifford Odets, you're not doing Tennessee Williams down there. It's a comedy, and when things are going well, it's really fun. And things were going well on I Love Lucy. Now, there were two writers who came after like the second or third year who also joined them and whose names you see quite often in the credits, Bob Schiller and Bob Weisskopf. And I happen to know both of them personally. They both passed on, but I worked with them, and I even worked with them at one point, one show that was done on the lot where they did I Love Lucy, and they walked me around and showed me where the office was and showed me which stage it was. It's stage 8, and you know, and they spoke glowingly of their time on the show. And believe me, and you know this true, if a writer is unhappy, a writer will bitch. Okay? When writers get together to have pastrami sandwiches and shorten their lives, basically what they do, they bitch. They bitch about the network, they bitch about other writers, they bitch about their wives, they bitch about actors from 22 years ago. And yet these guys had nothing but nice things to say. I just remember thinking at the time that, boy, I envied them. God, it would have been great to be writing I Love Lucy. Watching Being the Ricardos, I wouldn't want to be, that was just a snake pit. And it's one thing, here's where I don't give him a lot of slack. Okay, if I'm a screenwriter and I write a movie about the world of drumming, then the best I can do is research and talk to drummers or whatever, but that's not my world. Okay, if I'm writing a movie about the inner workings of a hospital, and I'm going to get things wrong because I'm not a hospital administrator, I don't really know. But Aaron Sorkin works on shows. Aaron Sorkin knows better. You know, when he had the director seat the Mertzes in a scene with their backs, they're sitting around a table and their backs are to the camera. And it takes 4 days in Lucy to determine, wait,
At
no,
2 in the morning.
they should be on the other side of the table so that we can see their faces. Well, first of all, that director would be fired in 11 seconds for doing something that stupid. And everyone in the room, the craft services guy would go, well, you can't see their faces. Why don't you see them? You know, so it's stuff like that where where Sorkin should know better.
Yeah, he's lived that world forever, and so you cut him some slack on an area where he has no expertise, and here he has as much expertise as anybody in on the planet in
Right.
this area. So, and that's where I go to. Okay, we don't want to be the guys that are nitpicking and going, well, they wouldn't use the word showrunner because it was like, okay, I mean, yes, that is a bad faux pas, but I think the reason, and I want to move on a little bit to Everett Raymond, but I think the reason you and I, if you're for your legacy, and one of the reasons I'm even doing this is to educate people that it was such a team effort. And when you're watching that Aaron Sorkin thing, you just go, oh, it's not a collaborative art. People snipe at each other. It's this torturous thing, and that's just not accurate. It's accurate on shows that fail. But for example, Ken, on Cheers, you guys, I assume, which Cheers won so many Emmys, it was crazy how good that show was and how much it was recognized. So that to me is the perfect storm of brilliant writing, cast, and position on the network. And on that show, I'm assuming that you guys laughed all the time and you have your normal challenges, but there.
Yeah, we had a great time that first year of Cheers. Yeah, and the ratings were terrible, but everybody believed in the show. It was great because we're all about the same age, and you're right. When a show begins, and you have this whole collection of people, we're all sort of one team, and we each just have different assignments. Okay, so I'm the writer, he's the actor, she's the wardrobe person, but we all treated each other equally, and we all worked hard to make this show that we were proud of. And I remember, sitting in the room and looking at the ratings with the Charles brothers, and we were going, this is our A stuff, guys. It's not like if we stayed a half hour later each night, the scripts would be any better. It's like, this is the best we can do. We were proud of it. But yeah, it was a joyful experience. Not that there weren't frustrations, not that there weren't scripts that didn't work, or a couple of very long nights doing rewrites, questioning various things. But at the end of the day, when the show was over, when we finished filming, everyone got together and had a drink, and we invited the guest cast, and we had mugs, crystal mugs we gave as a gift for the guest cast, and it was a joyous experience. And Raymond was very much like that. And it's funny, when I watch the movie, there's a line that would never happen where they hire, for reasons that are unfathomable, some director who Lucy just hates, and Lucy says to him, I just want you to know I have absolutely no faith in you whatsoever. And I'm thinking to myself, like, imagine if my first day at Raymond and Ray turns to me and says, I have no faith in you whatsoever.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, all right, let's go. Scene one. What the hell?
Yeah. So I think, because I'm reading the comments as they pass by also, this what we're talking about takes nothing away from Lucy or anything, because I want to get into details. I'll share some stuff because I just read the books, but this takes nothing away from Lucy. What Ken and I are saying is for the people, because the untenable, people are saying, what if they don't get along? When they don't get along, for example, it's no mystery that Roseanne had real trouble and would fire the entire writing staff. It would be 13 new writers, all 13 new. That's what happens when people don't get along. You don't have continuity. You don't have the same writers. It gets run from the star's perspective, and usually it falls apart because it's so much work that nobody can do everything on a show. There is no star that can carry the weight. I'm saying this knowing here's Ray, who acted, it was in the writer's room, who was in every single aspect of the show, and he and Phil we're working as a team, and it's an insane amount of work. So when it does do what people are asking about, when the star is that, or if you keep having comments like Ken just called out, where they go, I have zero faith in you, they're shooting themselves in the foot, because what they want to do is go, I don't have any faith in Ken Levine. This is all in their head. Let's see how he does. Oh, by day 2, he seems to know what he's doing. I'm the star of the show. It only makes me look better if Ken turns out to be a genius. It's so you're all working. So that's what happens. You can't have this teamwork thing that gets, I'm looking for what am I trying to say? You cut the legs out from under that. And a lot of comedy is a black box thing where you're trying it and you don't know what's funny. Mel Brooks, I watched a recent interview where Gene Wilder said, Mel Brooks didn't want to do Putting on the Ritz dance with Peter Boyle because he didn't think he just didn't get it, Mel Brooks. And then Gene Wilder had a huge, impassioned convincing him why it's worth. And Mel Brooks said, all right, we'll keep it in. Since you made the argument, we'll keep it in.
It's the funniest moment of that movie.
Of the movie.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're getting at, is you're building this teamwork environment. And if you don't build that teamwork environment, it will invariably fall apart and not work. And those are the shows that you see failing after 1 season, 2 seasons, or when you guys, the audience, see a great show. And then all of a sudden at the end of season 3, it's just starting to tank and tank. That means a lot of the key people had left because it's probably a terrible situation. So real specifically, so I'm just reading past, people are saying, have you seen Lucy on Password? Yeah, she's brilliant, Lucille Ball. Brilliant. So we're not taking anything away from her.
Also, on my podcast, Hollywood and Levine, also
yes.
on Instagram, a few weeks ago, I did a deep dive into I Love Lucy. And my whole podcast is about the background of I Love Lucy. So instead of having to read a 400-page book, it's the Cliff Notes version of
So
I Love Lucy.
And I heard that, and I heard that because it was maybe 2 months ago or something. But that's great. I couldn't recommend it more. Podcasts that Ken does. If you're interested in writing or really getting even deeper on the inside than Ken and I are talking about now, I highly recommend it. So there was one thing, Ken, which you brought up, which only, again, because I read it. When they were trying to get him the executive producer credit, Desi wasn't entitled to it because he wasn't quite the Desilu monster powerhouse yet. So Jess Oppenheimer had a deal that nobody could override him other than Lucy. So Lucy did go to him and say, give him the producer credit, because what happened was Desi was doing a tremendous amount of work, but Lucy was getting he was literally just a bongo player. In the press, they kept calling him just the bongo player. And Desi, according to Jess Oppenheimer and Lucy, and Madeline and Bob had incredible comedic timing. So you're right. By 1957, he could have been like, hey, I'm the king of this show, of any show, because he owned the studio.
He owned the studio, yes.
But initially he didn't. And so for the first 2 years, he was just the guy that Lucy forced onto the network. And
that's not true. That's just not true. It's because when they wanted to go to film.
Yes.
Okay. When they wanted to go to film, there was a problem with the unions. They then had to go to different unions. And he figured, if I've got to hire all these different people and I've got to put this whole thing together myself, I might as well start a company and run it. And the other thing that Desi did, which was incredibly smart, was he said to CBS, we'll take less money for the license fee, but we want to own the show. We want to own the rights to the film. And CBS at the time, thinking, well, no show is going to go into syndication for, it's like, what do they want? It's like, sure, go ahead. You can have the show. Yeah. Sure, George Lucas, you can have the merchandising, whatever you want. Who cares?
So
we save $5, but it was Desi who put the whole thing together. It was Desi who hired everybody. It was Desi who found a soundstage, because they were hard to find sound stages that would accommodate, 200 people in bleachers. He put all of this stuff together. He
Yeah.
had way more power than anybody. Now, maybe on the scripts, he abdicated to Jess Oppenheimer, but in terms of power on the show, oh my God, it's called Desi Lou.
Yeah. So what I'm talking about specifically is Jess Oppenheimer's executive producer credit. So that brings me to what you're bringing up. It was definitely in his book, he puts his contract in there and says, and what ended up happening was, because you're right about that. I want to go back to that, Ken, where you're talking about of setting up the negatives and the 4-camera thing and all that stuff, because you and Phil Rosenthal, who I had lunch with, and Ray brought up the same thing. And Ray was vehemently against the idea that you and Phil agreed on. Okay, so yes, Jess Oppenheimer just had a very, only because I read it last night, the very specific passage. So that's what I'm talking about. So yes, he did create Desi Lou, but Jess Oppenheimer's specific contract called for only Lucy could override him. And when Lucy did go to him and say, please give Desi, and you'll enjoy this, please give Desi the credit. He goes, well, because he's trying to build himself as a producer. And Jess Oppenheimer said, this is my first TV show. I'm trying to build up my credit also as a producer. And he said, Lucy, if I give it to Desi, then where are people going to think for me? So he rightfully, Jess Oppenheimer, is thinking, well, I have to preserve, because where are the lines? By the time Desi took it, Jess Oppenheimer was burnt out. He said, Desi's doing so, I'm going to give it to Desi. And then 2 days later, Desi's Jess's agent goes, did you see the trades? Desi took out a big thing and said, on the insistence of Jess Oppenheimer, because I, Desi, do so much work, he forced me to take this credit, which I didn't even want to do. And so Jess Oppenheimer goes into Desi's office and they have a big fight. And he says, Desi, why would you, I didn't say that. Like, you deserve the credit, but I didn't say that all this stuff. And then, in Jess Oppenheimer's words, he knew I was stuck because he's the head of the company now, and I can't. What am I, Jess Oppenheimer, going to do? And that's when Jess Oppenheimer left. So, I mean, he left not because of a fight. He was burnt out and had other things, so he left. And those two guys you mentioned had been in there as writers, so they moved on. But going back, a point that you brought up, that Phil Rosenthal brought up in our conversation, was why not make the movie about what Desi did, about creating this out of whole cloth? Now, you bring up the stage. For those, and this is where Ray said, no, I don't think anyone's interested. You know this, Ken. If you make a character interested in the subject, the audience will go along with you. If it's important to the character, it's important to the audience. They'll care. Because just like when you watch like an ESPN 30 for 30, I don't care about Filipino kickboxing, but then you're drawn in by the person and you're like, this is the most interesting thing I'm interested in. So if it's done right, I think you are correct. Phil is correct. That is an amazing story, because what you say, there weren't stages good enough to accommodate. There were 0 stages that were built to film multiple cameras with smooth floors and a fire code that allowed bleachers. So they went to Hollywood Center Studios, which is now Sunset Las Palmas. They said to the studio, listen, we want to do this. Desi literally had to go to all the houses across the street, because the studio, it's in a residential area, and knock on the door and say, listen, we're going to have to put an entrance for 200 people to enter and leave, and get permission from, it sounds so grassroots, from these people. Then the fire code had to be passed. So that's why they needed this big entrance. Then the studio was going bankrupt. So Desi got CBS to lend the studio $50,000 to stay afloat. Then they had to pave, because everybody would set up a camera and do the shot and set up a camera. No one had a smooth floor to even roll. So that story that I'm just racing through, that's an amazing story in itself.
If you start a movie with, okay, we want to do a situation comedy, we want to do it on film in Los Angeles, and they go, how? That can't be done.
Cannot be done.
It cannot be done. And it's like, all right, we're going to figure it out in the same way that Steve Jobs figures things out. We're going to figure out how to do this. And then we're going to figure out how to make what turns out to be the greatest show in television. How did that magic happen? How did it come about? To me, I'm going, okay, I'm sort of interested in the subject matter because I've watched I Love Lucy all my life. Yeah, okay, how does that work? The movie as is now, there's no suspense. No one changes. All of the stories they tell are stories you've heard a million times. And it's like, you know, they let Desi be in the show. You know that they let them do the pregnancy thing. You know that he's a womanizer. You know that she was accused of being a communist and wasn't a communist. So it's like, well, what do you learn? The characters don't change. They
Yeah.
don't learn anything, nothing. And it's just like, okay, this is supposedly a week in the life of hell.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So then I don't, again, for the audience watching, they all have Everett Raymond. You worked on Everett Raymond. I worked on Everett Raymond. I think that just to summarize with the Ricardos, what you're hearing from Ken and I is like, we'll give you some insight into how it really works. What Ken just said, I agree with. And Ray even afterwards said, I guess they did do a movie about developing the windshield wiper. So I guess if they can make that interesting. And I think, Ken, and you and I can talk when we have lunch next time about more of the Desilu history. And I just think it is a fascinating story. It's worth reading more on. It's worth listening to Ken's podcast where he goes into depth more about it. And it's just the one other thing I want to add is in a late interview, Jess Oppenheimer said, look, we were just making stuff that we usually made. It's just that it came at a point in history where 6 weeks before they aired, AT&T finished their transatlantic cable hookup. So everything aligned for them to all of a sudden be this giant hit. So just like what you're talking about, you're cranking out amazing shows on Cheers, but nobody's quite watching yet. But you're still going to be. So when you guys became a giant hit, you were still making the great show you were making when nobody watched it. And that's the same thing that happened in the story of the early astronauts. The test pilots were going up there. Nobody knew who they were. But all of a sudden, the entire country was focused on this fight between Russia and America, and they were thrust into the spotlight. And so I Love Lucy benefited from the first hit of a domestic sitcom, a format that for some reason, Ken, you who know multicams more than anybody, fell out of favor for single cameras. So the Everett Raymond, All in the Family, Cheers, all these shows that human beings respond to, all of a sudden, very often, Hollywood's like, we need sexy and single camera and stuff like that. But we know since I Love Lucy, the relatability, the ability, the not fancy, single camera shots here, there is what draws people in. So there's a...
Yeah, I mean, look, I was a large part of probably the most successful single camera comedy, which was MASH. But I'm here to say that if you look at the history of television and you look at the classic situation comedies down through the years, from I Love Lucy to The Honeymooners to The Dick Van Dyke Show, All in the Family, Mary Tyler Moore, Maude, Odd Couple, Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley, Everybody Loves Raymond, Friends, Seinfeld, I mean, Cheers, Frasier, you can just go down the line, and 90% of the most successful sitcoms, Big Bang Theory, I mean, it doesn't have to be shows that were 50 years old.
Right.
That people like multi-camera shows. And I think the reason is that those shows are held accountable. You know, when you have 200 strangers that you have to make laugh, then you're going to bust your ass to make sure that that joke really works. If you're a single camera, you come up with a joke and it's like, oh, okay, me and the three other writers in the room think it's funny, but America doesn't necessarily, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think that accountability factor is what's really key to multi-camera shows. And I think what happened was there was, by the late 90s, such a flood of them, and many of them were terrible and are long forgotten, and they cranked up the laugh track. And I think the audiences just got sick of sitting through bad sitcoms and bad laugh tracks. So they were looking for something better, but that doesn't diminish the good ones.
Yeah. So I think I agree 100%. And I think what happened is it's not the format. I mean, sorry, it is to some degree the format. So don't shoot the messenger in that the really bad shows that Ken is talking about, just because they're bad, they would have been bad single camera films, radio, they would have been bad, bad, bad. So,
right.
And I don't know, because Ken and I in Hollywood, there's a weird thing by the network where to an outsider would go, well, let's do multi-cameras because that's what historically works and seems to be the biggest hits in history. And then all of a sudden Hollywood goes, yeah, but it feels old-fashioned or something, until a Seinfeld comes along where you go, oh, this is completely, unique feeling and cool, yet it's a multi-camera. It's not going to be good and cool. It's like, well, what are you talking, good storytelling. And the accountability that Ken's talking about, you have 200 strangers watching live, either laughing or not laughing. So they don't care about Ken's feelings when they come in there. They either laugh or don't laugh. They don't go, well, he has a long line of credits, I guess we should respect his joke. They don't, they're completely agnostic. They just want to laugh. And so it also brings alive the performer. It's essential. Peter Boyle's timing was impeccable when it came to show night and hearing those live laughs. And that was also a critical thing that they pointed out in all of the books about Lucy. Lucy came alive in front of a live audience, and that's what they did with her radio show.
Actors
well.
feed off of that energy. They really do. And their performance can go up, and I've seen this as a director many times, that their performance is just elevated, feeding off the energy of the audience. And in terms of networks saying, oh, it's old fashioned, it's retro, etc. Is there a more retro multi-camera sitcom than Friends? Okay.
Yes.
And Friends is basically going to be the new I Love Lucy. Friends is the show that generation after generation is going to discover Friends, and 40 years from now, kids are going to be watching Friends.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, because have you ever done a show overseas, Ken, an adaptation overseas? So I did one in Poland. Phil did Everett Raymond in Russia. But Friends plays universally.
I'm waiting for Tahiti.
Oh, that's going to be a long wait, Ken. I hate to break it to you. But when you go, please send me a postcard of you.
I want to do Northern Exposure in Tahiti.
But I bring it up because Friends, the Polish people were like, we love Friends, we love Friends. What about Seinfeld? Seinfeld does not play overseas at all because it's such provincial humor, and it's a very specific thing. India, the same thing. So I think you're right. Friends will be this perennial hit. And if you look at, you don't need any more proof than look at Friends, the magnitude of the interest on Friends that went off the air in 2004 or 5, And so
Right.
It's good. So Ken, let's talk about the sneeze a little bit. Okay. Yeah. I don't know if you read, but there's a global pandemic that some of us lived through. Okay. And so,
heard about it.
Yes. When you watch that episode now, the sneeze carries even more weight because the freaking out. And of course, Ray personally. Ray is very much that way. Ray, way before the pandemic, carried Perel and was very worried about germs. But do you even remember, because I don't want to get too, I don't want to test your memory too much, because a lot of times I talk to the writers and they go, did I write that episode? Yes, you wrote that. Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Let me think now. So, and I know I'm asking a lot, but does anything pop in your head about your experience on the Sneeze?
Well, what I remembered, which was a real challenge for me as a director, was the entire second half of that show is in Raymond's bedroom. And throughout that scene, people come and go, and it's not just Deborah and Marie and, Robert. It's also, Ray's friends, and people are bringing in pizzas, and the guys are bringing in basketballs, and there's stuff, and it's like there's all this stuff going on. The mom is bringing in soup, and that it was really a challenging but fun scene to direct. That's my big memory. That's what I'm really proud of in that show, is that whole last scene, and block them, and where are they going to be, and how are you going to get the basketball, and now she's got to come with the soup, and where are we going to put him? How am I going to get a camera? I'm going to need a shot of Peter to get a reaction. It's like, oh my God. And the thing I also loved in that show, I loved how simple the storytelling was. You don't need 4 subplots. And I loved, with all of that stuff going on, and it all had to build and have a pace to it, to build to Deborah basically having a meltdown and screaming at everybody. And she's got this great scene, because it's all about him being a hypochondriac and everything else. She has this great scene, and then the phone rings, and it's the doctor saying he has strep throat.
Yes, so I was going to say, I was going to compliment you on the beginning portion, because there's a portion that builds up to a great moment, and this can only happen later, and it can't happen in season 1. But and I don't even know if you remember, but Ray is paranoid, and he's washing and she's like, go ahead and wash that dish, and then Patty goes to the refrigerator, Deborah goes to the refrigerator, takes out a ginger ale and leans against the refrigerator, which is the absolute perfect moment for Marie to come in, look at Ray's washing dishes, and of course, lazy Deborah is leaning against the refrigerator, just relaxing. And so that to me is a directing moment. That is because you wouldn't normally have Deborah leaning against the refrigerator, and also she knows what has gone down, Deborah has, but it tees up perfectly for a non-line from Marie, because she's taking in the sights, and as you're watching as the viewer, you're watching this perfect thing of relaxing lazy Deborah and the mother who's just like, of course.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what helps in a case like this too is the actors are just so good that if you set up that visual for Doris Roberts, she's going to walk in and she's going to sell the attitude and the moment. It's just going to be killer, because she's just going to know the right look, the right amount, just how to take that in. Believe me, that part of it on that show was so easy for me. It's like, God, these guys, they're such professionals. They're so good. Believe me, I got spoiled directing Everybody Loves Raymond, because you go to a different cast that's not as skilled, and you're landing the plane by radar.
Well, and I think and Phil talked about this just in Patty Heaton, you had someone who could be beautiful, play sexy, funny, and do all of those things at once. And I know you've worked with Mary Tyler Moore, and I think early on, just as far as just acting is concerned, early on when Patty Deborah starts crying, there's another episode like season 1 or 2 where she bursts into tears. I think it might have been the first year of Turkey or Fish was the episode. And Phil, you know, she was so believable in her crying and her put uponness. And I think for you're directing the scene, which is comedic, but at the beginning, which I completely forgot, you know, Patty is the seductress, which you buy. Of course, she gets thwarted by Ray's hypochondria,
Right.
but you're having to deliver this because, to be honest, and you know this, as Seinfeld used to say, there's not a lot of like, you know, hunky, you know, comedians out there. You don't want, but for Patty, she was able to cross funny, put upon sexy, and it's a rare thing. And is in any of your time working with Mary Tyler Moore, and I don't want to get into like personality stuff, but just as far as delivering,
It's you know, a master class. You would watch Mary, and she was like amazing at that. And like Patty, if Mary did something and you went, oh, okay, that's great, she'd lock in, and she will do it that way every single time. Yeah, you know, actors, it's like they're great on Monday, then Tuesday, well, then Wednesday it's something. Well, why didn't you do what you did? I don't remember what I did Tuesday, you know. But you know, my favorite in working with Patty, I don't remember the title of it, but the premise was, the scene was that she had a splinter.
yeah.
And
What
Ray
good are
was,
you?
Ray was trying to prove, you know, how helpful he was. So he had the tweezers and was chasing her around because she didn't want him to do it. And the scene as written said they run into the living room and Ray catches her, and then it moves on. And I thought, well, let's have some business with this. Let's see if we can have some fun. And we choreographed, and they get to the floor, and you know, Ray grabs her ankles and like pulls her and turns her around, and she squirts away and everything. And look, there's a lot of actors that would go, look, I don't want to just, you know, be on the floor for another hour here dragging around like, well, let's try this. Would this be funnier? Would that be funnier?
Yeah.
And she was a great sport. And I remember you guys all coming down for the run through and being like delighted, like, where did this all come from? You know? Yeah. And it's never would have happened if Patty hadn't been game to say, okay, freelance director,
I'll do it.
I'll do it.
Yeah.
I'll try it.
Yeah, so that's the moment she points out the hand. I happened to climb up in the rafters, Ken, for that moment because we touched quickly
there you go
upon it. Yeah, and that's the beginning of it. And so I think just because we talked
you
a little,
send me these photos.
Yeah, so we talked about it a little bit in the last thing, and I think what Ken's saying also is there's a very good chance that another actress would have said, you know what, Ken, guest actor, why don't we bounce it? Let's tell Phil about the idea so I don't have to get on the floor for 30 minutes so that Phil can come and go, put it back. I don't even like this, you know? So yeah, that's great. That's a testimony.
You know, and look, and I told him, I said, you're going to see something a little different here. So that he was forewarned. And again, my feeling is if he didn't like it, then we'll take it out, whatever. Yeah. But you know, take a shot.
Yeah. Ken, I want to ask you about this because it's for people watching. They go, well, I've had a lot of comments, not related to you, but just in general, where they go, I don't understand. You know, Spielberg directs. It's a Spielberg movie. Blah blah blah. How do you guys have different directors on a sitcom? And that is very, very normal, especially on a single camera. You can't have the same director for every show because they have to alternate. They can't
They
do
have to
every week.
prep. Yeah, they
They have to
prep.
prep.
Mhm.
So on a multi-camera, just so people are clear, on a multi-camera, you're in the same place every week. On a single camera, there's a lot more prep work. You're prepping for a movie every week. On a multi-camera, you could, if pressed, instantly shoot another episode because the sets are there, the cameras. You never want to do that, but you could. So for you, Ken, how would you explain just to the novice how can you have multiple directors and the show kind of still looks in a good way the same?
I think it's because, as opposed to a motion picture where the director really has final say, in a multi-camera show and any television show, the showrunner really has final control. And the showrunner can come down for a run through and go, wait, what is this? No, reblock this. And the showrunner can walk out onto the stage and give actors notes and reblock and everything else. So you basically have the same quality control in directing that you do with the writing, in that it's the showrunner who basically has to sign off on it. And you learn there are certain shows that have they like certain kind of shots, and other shows like other kind of shots. And I've always felt, as a freelance director, when you come in, you're a substitute teacher. Except, how many substitute teachers come into a job as the boss? You know?
Yeah.
But it's tough. You know, you go in at those first couple of days,
Yeah.
and the cast is kind of wary of you. Who is this guy? Is he good? Can we trust him? The crew doesn't know you. How skilled are you in camera blocking and that kind of thing? What kind of set do you run? Are you easygoing? Are you kind of nervous? You know, there's a lot. Can we swear on this?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay. So I did my, and the cast will kind of feel you out a little bit. And my first day directing Dharma and Greg, and I wound up directing a bunch of episodes of those. But Susan Sullivan, the first day, just takes me aside and goes, okay, so who the fuck are you? I explained who I was and my credits, and I've directed Frasier and this and that, and it's like, oh, okay, great, happy to have you. And then it was fine.
Yeah.
I mean, you know the story about how Peter tested me.
Yes, you told it. So I would recommend, just because time is so precious. Ken told that story in his last visit, so I suggest go back. I'll put up the link again, and it's a great story, and that makes sense of Peter, and obviously, because when we talked about it last time, Peter is a guy who was Joe in the movie Joe, right? And he was a giant young Frank, so he was an intimidating presence. He wasn't if Patty comes up to you, she comes up to your belly button. You know what I mean?
Right.
And you feel like Peter would give you, a little bit toe to toe. If you want to recount the story, Ken, quickly, I feel bad because you can recount it if you want, real quickly.
Okay, well, it was the first episode I directed, and it was the first day, and it's an episode called Pet Cemetery, and there is like a last scene that takes place in their backyard, and it was shot on the stage, and you were going to have a rain effect. So they had rigged up the rain effect, and we were going to do the the blocking for the first day, and they said the rain effect is up. Do you want to use it? And I said, no, it's the first day. We're just feeling our way around. So I said, okay, so I'm going to do Peter and Doris, then I'll have Ray and Patty, and Brad, and then I'll have the kids here. And Peter goes, no, I don't want to be there. He moves around between Ray and Deborah, I think. I want to be here. And I said, well, that really kind of makes no sense because you've got private conversation with Doris. Now you're having to say that across Ray. I can make that work. I can make that work. I said, okay. And then I turned to the assistant director, whatever, and I said, all right, change of plans. I want to do the rain effect, but just over Peter. Peter laughed, got up, and moved around to where I wanted him to be, and he was fine. And we got along great, but
he's testing.
They test you. They test you.
It's a tough position. Ken, only because we're going to run out of time again. What I wanted to do before it's so far after, you and I both watched The Beatles Get Back.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? And it was phenomenal to watch. And I thought, because you wrote an interesting thing, which I also agree with you on, the creative process as it applies to comedy that you witnessed in The Beatles.
Well, what was interesting to me about that is, especially in the early section, they're on a sound stage and they're trying to rehearse, and they're also trying to write some songs. And meanwhile, there's crew people that are preparing for the movie that's coming in 2 weeks, and the camera guys, and who knows who else is like wandering around, and they're in the middle of all of this, and they're writing Lady Madonna. I mean, like, what? How are they doing this? This is just so amazing how focused they were. And, writing rooms, sometimes there's all this other stuff going on. And when we were on MASH, we would do our rewrites, since we didn't, want to go back and forth to the office all day long. We sat in the mess tent and did our rewrites on MASH while the crews are going by and hauling in sets and stuff like that. And we're sitting at the mess table writing comedy.
Yeah. And I think one of the things you wrote about also, Ken, which I agree, is you watch the Beatles and they noodle around with this inventory of songs in their head, and they're kidding around and they're laughing, and then they get back to Lady Madonna. And so in the writer's room, what you had written about, which I agree, is you go on these tangents, and to an outsider, they're going to go, you're goofing about the price of toilet paper and a run about a flight attendant, and you guys are trying to figure out a pregnancy episode. What are you doing? Get to work. And that creative flow that happens, where, kind of going back to the beginning where we said, in those moments, you're laughing so hard, and you go on a run where you're going, I can't believe we're getting paid for this. Like, we're just laughing to the point where and then that laughter is over, and then you get back into the script. And it keeps
the energy going. It really does. It keeps the energy going. It keeps your mind sharp. And again, you just have to remind yourself, we're doing comedy. Okay? So we have to train our brains to be thinking comedy. We want those synapses to all be firing.
And it all comes out of the same pipeline. It's kind of like you're doing, and I have to tell you, Ray had a softball team way before ever was Raymond, and his brother, the cop, took it very seriously. So he recruited me and a bunch of other players, and I was a pretty good player. And the other, Tom Hertz, who I don't know that you've ever met him, but Tom Hertz,
met him. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, who created Rules of Engagement. Oh, we're all comedians there, right? And Ray's brother, the cop, would come over and go, Raymond, we're down by 3 runs, and all your friends can do is kid around. And he would go, Richard, they're comedians. Like, if we're ahead by 8 runs or we're down by 10, they're gonna make jokes. That's what they do. And it's the same type of thing. When you watch the Beatles, you go, oh, they are having fun playing music, because you do watch that and you go, oh, it's laborious at times trying to go through, you're watching them noodling around, you're watching Paul noodling around, and you see George kind of yawning, not in a disrespectful way, but they're punching the clock and they're in there with the nose to the grindstone. But every once in a while they would break into some, song from 1959, some R&B song, and you're like, oh, they're now a band again, and now back to, all right, how do we fix this bridge? And
Right.
that would be in the writer's room. Okay, how do we fix this one scene that's just laying there like a dog after a 15-minute run about something completely unrelated? So
right. Sometimes, you're doing these runs and stuff like that, and your subconscious is still working on the problem, and you come up with it.
Yes.
You go, whoa, guys, what if, Ray, hits her with a frying pan, whatever.
Yeah. So here, let me get a few questions, Ken, for you, because I can talk to you for hours, but I don't know that people want to listen for hours. So I am going to invite you back as many times as you come on. But hear from Donnell in England, rather. Are there any current sitcoms you'd recommend? It's slim pickings, it seems.
No, I can't think of any current sitcom that's on the air that that I watch, and it's really sad because I love sitcoms.
Yeah.
I love them. And so I end up I watch old ones.
Yeah.
And
I'm going to say the same for me. And it's not like, hey, here's two old guys reminiscing about everything is terrible. But if there was a new thing that came up,
I would love it.
Yes.
I would love it.
Well, it would help everyone's career, because if there was another multi-camera sitcom that was great and a hit, then unfortunately, because Hollywood responds to trends, they would go, Ken, have you ever thought about doing a multi-camera sitcom? Because we really love those. And you go, a multi-camera, okay, I'll try. By the way, someone just mentioned Big Wave Dave.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. That was an hour ago they mentioned. I'm trying to go back. That was such a funny sequence with Patty Heaton getting dragged all over. Did it take many takes?
No.
But at least two.
It was pretty well choreographed, and they, we rehearsed it a few times for precision, and they just did it.
Yeah. And as I've shared with these people, you usually do everything two takes, even if it's perfect the first take, in case something happens to the film.
Oftentimes you'll have different camera assignments.
Coverage.
It's like do the math. You have 4 or 5 people, and you want to get each one on camera, and you want to get a master. Even if somebody isn't talking, if Ray is talking and has a line, you want a camera on Deborah to get her reaction. So it's a Rubik's Cube you're kind of putting together.
And I think because we tend to get too inside baseball, when Ken is saying a master, it's a wide shot of everybody in it. And sometimes you can't get every single coverage on the first pass. So the second time you do the take where Patty is fantastic getting dragged across the thing, Ken has to get a different shot on the second take. So he has that perspective. Hello, Maurice. More questions. Who was Patty nervous doing the sexy scene in the sneeze?
No.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, when you come from an acting background, because people have asked this before on there, they go, what about when they're kissing? So it's work. I know it sounds, when you're watching, you're like, oh, she's sexy and it looks great, but it's just like, all right, what's our scene? Let's go. Okay, then into Warder, let's go. I mean, it's you're in the sitcom. There's nothing sexy about it per se, and it's just B scene is up. What is it? You're in a lingerie. Okay.
Right. And when there's kissing, like in rehearsal, it's like, okay, now we'll kiss. It's like, they don't, I don't make them kiss 15 times in rehearsal. It's like, all right, when the cameras are rolling, you'll kiss. Unless there's some choreography that has to be done where she's got to see something out of the corner of her eye or whatever. But otherwise, it's like, all right, and then you kiss.
Ken Levine, I'm getting interrupted by somebody, but I don't even know if I want to, because we were talking about being the Ricardos, but who he agreed with. Hold on one second. Yeah. Yeah.
Ghost of Desi Arnaz called in.
You don't force Patty. You don't force Patty to kiss Ray because that's just torture and mean.
Wait a second.
I didn't say
What?
that. Hello there.
Right.
We had to put peanut butter on my lips to get Patty to kiss me.
Ken.
And what are you doing in my house?
Ken. Raymond, what you missed is we're talking about being the Ricardos.
Yes. By the way, it's halftime. I got to get back to the Jets to losing, but go ahead.
Really? This is the one game they're losing, huh?
Yeah. Well, it's the last one they're going to lose for this season.
What we were talking about, we talked about being the Ricardos for a long time.
Yeah.
And by the way, just for everybody, I'm Tom McKelvey. I was a writer on There Was Raymond. We're talking to Ken Levine, who directed, and we're talking about the Sneeze episode where you get sneezed on.
Right. Who's this photo bomber in the back behind?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But we were talking about the Ricardos, and we were saying how would it be interesting to tell the story of the multicam genesis, and you said who wants to, it's so not known to the public. And Ken, Phil, and I all say, well, you can make it interesting.
Yeah, I know. You can make anything. Like the movie about the intermittent windshield wiper, the guy who invented that. Remember what Greg Kinnear starred in that movie about the guy who invented the button, the switch that makes your windshield intermittent instead of continuous. Yeah. So you can, with the right script and the right story, you can make anything interesting.
I mean, in Being the Ricardos, there's that whole subplot about whether Desi should get an executive producer credit. Do you think America cares about any of that? Do they know what an executive producer does or why that's important? Or you know, it's like what?
Yeah.
What? Who cares?
Yeah.
Windshield wipers. That's. It seemed it's killed Greg Kinnear's career though, but it was a good movie.
Yeah, he hasn't done much since then, right? Yeah.
No.
I wonder why that is, by the way, because he's very good.
And Ray, here's what we're talking about also. You're watching the Beatles, right? Get Back.
Yes.
And what Ken wrote about is they break into songs, right?
Yes.
And then it's kind of like the writer's room where you ad-lib for 20 minutes and then you get back to the script. The trick is getting back to the script.
I said that to you. I said, I don't want to we're not going to compare ourselves to the Beatles, but that documentary, that process reminded me of the writer's room, where you just spew everything and you just riff, and then all of a sudden you hit something, Yeah.
Well, what I was saying to Phil is like, it's amazing because you're watching them say Get Back. You go, when do they know it's right? And Phil's like, well, when do you know it's right in the writer's room? Again, not to compare you to the Beatles, but you just hear the music of comedy.
Right.
You get it. Here's a comment. This is either for me, Ken, or Ray. You are so cute! Exclamation point.
That's for me.
Raymond. No, that's for Ken.
That's
okay.
for me.
You think it's for you, Ken? Okay. By the way, Ken has worked on MASH, Cheers, Frasier, With Mary Tyler Moore, and he said his low point was Everybody Loves Raymond.
It was working with me.
Yeah.
Why this looks like an ad for LensCrafter with all three of us here.
Yeah. By the way, Ken, just because Ray's going to take off, but people are like, Ray, come on, Ray doesn't have Instagram. He won't go Instagram. It's like, it is what it is. So when I go, Ray, can you go on it? What do you?
We'll do a full episode soon.
Yeah.
We'll do that soon.
Do you remember the dragging Patty? Sorry, in the sneeze, dragging Patty across the floor and doing all that stuff, or
during in the sneeze episode?
Yeah, in the sneeze.
No, that wasn't the sneeze. That was
Yes. No, that was what good are you? What good are you is the name, Ken. Do you remember?
Trying to take the tweed.
I cut Splinter, taking a splinter out of her hand. Yeah.
Whoops.
And then I was also dragging her during the baggage episode.
Yeah, that was up the steps.
Yeah, I do remember that. Yeah.
That was fun. You guys were good sports.
Did you direct an episode with Shamsky in it? The dog? Or is
No.
that no?
No.
Yeah. We had a dog for about 10 minutes, right? Didn't we have Shamsky?
Well,
yeah.
Ken, and Ray's got to cut loose to watch the Jets lose more.
Yeah, yeah.
But as you know, Ken was an announcer for the Seattle Mariners.
Yes.
And so we named Shamsky after Art Shamsky. And for those that are watching in England, he was a member of the 1969 New York Mets.
Yeah.
Of all the people we had problems getting, Art Shamsky had the most negotiation where he's like, I don't know. And
Yeah.
feels like you're Art
No, but
Shamsky.
you know what?
not
He has
Tom
a
Seaver.
he has a podcast. I just did it about 2 months ago.
Who does?
Art
Shamsky?
Shamsky or the dog?
Yeah. No, Shamsky's still in good shape. He's still there, man. He's he must be like close to 90, right? I mean, or 85 or 90 right now.
Shamsky? Yeah.
Art
By the way,
Shamsky?
Ray,
What?
any sitcoms you watch now? Ken, no. Me, no.
Sitcoms? I don't think there are any sitcoms I watch. Well, I mean, Curb Your Enthusiasm. I watch that. Is that a sitcom, kind of? Yeah. No.
Well, I mean, it's like we were just saying we would love to, because it
Yeah.
sounds like we're just old guys saying there's nothing good on anymore. There's an amazing period of TV.
You know,
just
when
about
I
sitcoms.
wrote on the, Palmolive Comedy Hour, we had Milton Berle and we had Red Buttons and, those guys. Those guys were Imogene Coca. She was funny.
Somebody just wrote the best episode was She's the One, where the woman when she ate a fly.
Yeah.
And I happened to watch that. I caught it on Peacock, and I watched that episode. And a little fun fact is when I say she ate it, I was so pent up, and holding this tension in for so long that I hyperventilate and I almost faint. And if you watch that episode again, when I say she ate it, you see me go like this. I literally almost faint there on stage from hyperventilating. Yeah, but that person is right. That is one of our best episodes. At least the first half. The first half was when we're in the kitchen and all that's happening.
Yeah.
Is one of my favorites.
Well, I don't know if you remember this, but you wrote it, but Royce and I worked on the first half of that. But when people are like, well, what a crazy story, almost all of it happened in real life.
To my brother.
To Ray's brother.
But it was snakes. It wasn't frogs. That the woman that it happened to him with was obsessed with snakes, and he climbed out the window.
Yeah, his brother,
Yes.
Ken, his brother, who's a policeman in real life, who had an ankle holster, who had a gun, had to go out the fire escape to escape from this woman who had snakes in her
went on a
bathroom.
date with. Yeah.
But Ken, just off of the writing thing, and then you got to go, Ray.
Yeah, I gotta go.
No, you're killing this.
Yeah.
You're killing Ken's time.
Yeah.
Ray, Kevin, and I were locked in a room for like a week trying to think of a movie idea. And I think Ray came up with the idea of like, Kevin, what if I see your date eat a fly? Okay. That's in like April. And that's it. No movie comes of it. It's just a waste of a week as far as we're concerned in hiatus. And then
that was the germ. I just had that. What if some woman had like an impulse disorder, and when Kevin went to the bathroom, his date, I saw her eat the fly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we combined the two stories together.
Yeah. So talking about creative stuff, Ken, then 6 months later, it's like, well, let's do that. And then we're like, oh, didn't Ray think of a fly eating thing? Why don't we have that tie in with the real life story? Yeah. All right.
Hey, nice to see you, buddy.
Nice to see you. Go Jets.
Right, I'm going to head out. Yeah.
Go Jets.
And Ray has, see you, Ray.
And all you guys watching too. Thank you.
I loved you in Italy. By the way, Ray has a great movie, which at some...
Man. Oh, man.
So sorry, we went over, but what I wanted to say, everybody, that was Ray. He was the star of the show. He's happy to talk at any time on Instagram. It's just that he's not on Instagram. So if you go to his house and refuse to leave, then eventually he has to come on and say hello. But what I was going to say for everybody, Ray just wrote and directed a movie. I'm assuming it'll be out in the spring or something. It'll probably be at South by Southwest. It's a phenomenal movie. And I look forward to you, Ken, watching it. Of course, don't write a bad review, because I know you have a podcast, and it would be great for him to do it, talking about writers and really get into depth to talk about it. But it's really a heartfelt thing, and it's something that he worked on for like 7 years, and it the writing shows the quality of the writing. And let me just go back. There were a couple comments here. I want it to be clear. Ken and I are not in any way saying that Lucy wasn't talented or didn't do anything already. Or any of the actors, any of the actors on the shows we're talking about, they all elevate our material. We were just trying to say it is a group, cohesive thing. So we completely appreciate the cast. Ken, I'm only going back by some of the comments as I'm scrolling back. Like, well, Lucy was good, wasn't she? Yes.
Lucy was the best that ever was. That's how good Lucy was.
And let me tell you something that came from reading the books, Ken. They said Desi nailed the takes from the beginning to end, never changed, because you brought up a thing about the actors where you're going, where were you? You nailed it day one, and now you're not even a tenth. So they said, so Jess Oppenheimer and the writers all said, Desi comes in, gets the comedy, delivers the comedy. The table read first take is the same as second take on show night. Lucy would work and work and work, and then genius on a level that you've never seen by show night. But it took her.
Lucy didn't want to see the script until the table reading, because she wanted it to be fresh, and she wanted to be delighted by what. And that's the other thing they got wrong, is they had her in the writing room looking at future stories, going, "Yeah, I'll do that one. No, I won't do that one. Yeah, I can do this. I can be funny here."
Yeah.
Another big problem, I just have to say, is how do you cast a woman playing Lucy and all the great expressions on Lucy? How do you cast a woman who can't move her face?
So, unfortunately, I'm going to agree with you 100%, Ken, because she is a good actress.
Great actress.
And her flexibility of her face, you would say, of one thing off the top, they go, well, we have a 10-time Oscar winner. Can she no, she cannot make a facial expression. Okay, then should we just move on? Because we're playing the most elastic-faced, actress. So doesn't that cross her off? And what we don't know behind the scenes, Ken, which I've often said on this agent has this deal, and this agent has this deal, and this, you don't know how if someone ends up starring in a show. Just like sitcoms, when you go, how did that lame thing happen? Well, the president of this network has the power, and they forced the writer to. So I don't know the whole backstory. Obviously, it'll be talked about for years, but I'm going to unfortunately agree with you 100%. And you have to get past that. Otherwise, you're really hating it, All right, Ken, before we get interrupted by some other star, which gets just annoying because we're trying to have some serious conversation here. Let me see, final questions. Yes, Lucy Arnaz liked it. Okay. A lot of people said, hey, Lucy liked it. I'll be interested to hear. I hope have you met Lucy Arnaz ever?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Super nice lady.
Yeah. Well,
there's really, really talented in her own right. A great singer. I saw her in Broadway, and they're playing our song, which she starred in with Robert Klein.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I remember that. So sorry, the name of Ray's movie so far, it might be Someplace Real in Queens. It might be the name of it. I don't think they've landed on the name yet. You won't be able to see it. Ken's podcast is called Hollywood and Levine. And that's the question there.
And my Instagram page is also Hollywood and Levine.
Hollywood and Levine, the Instagram page, which I did help you set up, Ken. And
I would not be on Instagram if it were not for you.
Yes, you're welcome. And it took almost no effort because we did it during lunch, and I said, "Here, let's just do it." And
you just dip and did it. And I'd still be sitting at the same table.
Ken, I would love to have lunch. I know you've blocked my emails and stuff since our last thing, and the block must have come off because I was able to invite you to do this. But at some point,
how'd that happen? Yeah.
At some point when COVID ends,
Or at least after the surge, let's do
after
it.
the next surge, maybe we can have a salad and talk more behind the scene stuff. So everybody, let me just see if there's any more questions for Ken as I race up. Yes, there's some great interviews of Desi Arnaz on. By the way, I have only respect for Desi reading his book. It's unfortunate that he had a huge drinking problem and womanizing problem, because he's a really brilliant guy. And Lucy as well. You know, these are two epic talents in their own right. And there's a Desi very late on Letterman, which I'll send to you, Ken, where Desi is towards the end of his life, but you see the amount of charisma he still had, even though he's been worn down by a lifetime.
I met him one time, and how about this? My partner and I finished pitching a pilot at CBS, and we rode down the elevator at CBS with Desi Arnaz. Yeah.
What? Wait. Why don't open with that? Open with every conversation with that.
We just said, you know, we're comedy writers because of you and your show. And he was, you know, hey, thank you, partners. He was, you know, yeah. But we were blown, and to see him at CBS of all places.
You're at ground. It's like you ran into one of the Wright brothers at Kitty Hawk.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's not like, you know, we're in the salad bar at the Sizzler.
By the way, this is almost comparable. Ray and I, the first season of Everett Raymond, we went into, what was the soup plantation where you could get cheap soup, right? It was a restaurant in LA. Then this is when Ray and I know we're in Hollywood. It's the first 3 weeks. And, you know, Ray's just a struggling stand-up, so money is tight. And we know, and he'd been fired from News Radio after one day. So we know the future does not look bright. Cut to us in Soup Plantation, and we see, also eating soup, Weird Al Yankovic, and we thought, we have made it. We are in the big time. We've seen another celebrity. Now, I wish, Ken, that you had an iPhone, this is before it was invented, to take a picture with Desi at that moment.
Oh, me too. And, you know, now you would have.
Yeah, you would have six of them.
Now you would have.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think when we have lunch, and then maybe the next time you join, we'll talk more, because really, when you read Desi's life story, it's amazing. And his instinct, and what he kept coming back to, was let the audience tell you what they like. And that was really something that he kept going back to. So he knew Lucy did well in front of a live audience. They did this kind of vaudeville act that Madeline and Bob Carroll wrote for them to prove that to ABC, to CBS, that they were likable on stage. All these things that he kept coming back to, because, you know, in the sea of Hollywood, when you're lost by do this, if you just go down to what does the audience want to see, relatable comedy, like in Everybody Loves Raymond, you know, like in I Love Lucy, it's really inspiring to read his story. I
have one Desi story to end with that the Bobs told me, Schiller and Weisskopf. So they said that he called them up on Friday and said, look, on Sunday, I have to give a speech for the Buick dealers or something like that. Could you guys come over on Saturday and help me write a speech? And they said, sure, we'll give up a Saturday. And they go over to his house and they spend 4 or 5 hours in the afternoon and put together this nice speech for him. The next morning, each of them has a Cadillac delivered to them. As a thank you from Desi for giving up your Saturday.
Yeah, and I think that comes across in spades of how much he loved and appreciated the writers.
Yeah.
And I think the very thing you opened on by saying that these people wrote for Lucy for 50 years, that's not what you saw displayed in Being the Ricardos. Those people wrote for Lucy for 4 months and then got fired. She loved them. And
you can go on YouTube, and they have, I think it's like the 1952 or 53 Emmy Awards, and I Love Lucy wins, you know, the award, and they get up there and say, because at the time there was no writing categories, and Lucy and Desi take their time to tell the Academy you need to have writing categories because our writers, who they named, Madeline and Bob, and Jess, it's all because of them. They deserve a category. It's all about the writers. They appreciate it, and those were the days when it was like a banquet. It was not a big deal.
Yeah,
No.
the early days. That's awesome, and that's so good to hear. Ken, always a pleasure. I apologize for the guy interrupting because
Really,
yeah,
really.
better security next time. I would love to have lunch. Now, when I watched our last thing, I said, I think it was, you were on in September, and I said, Ken, let's come back and please come back by November, and that was a year ago. So, and this is now also officially our longest ever Instagram Live that I've done. So compliments to you. Yeah. All right.
The bridge on the
much.
River Kwai of Instagrams. Yeah.
So everybody, Hollywood and Levine, if you want to know any inside information about writing focused stuff, but also everything across the board, Ken has fantastic guests, really, really deep dive into some stuff. Some stuff is just pure, Hollywood nostalgia that you'll love. And Ken, sorry, had you mentioned, I think, and I've asked, you're the only person that I know who's ever been to Nick Adele's.
I was at Nick Adele's and I saw William Frawley.
Fred Mertz.
I was like 7 years old. I was there with my grandparents, and it was like, Fred Mertz. Oh my God. Oh my God. His face was redder than the little live logo
icon.
Yeah.
And this is after I Love Lucy ended.
No, this was during.
During.
But it was a Sunday. It was a Sunday.
Okay, so you're cutting some slack. Yeah, because Lucy and okay, great. We'll talk more. All right, thank you, fans, for sticking with us for the hour and a half. I really appreciate it, Ken. Thanks for all your insights as usual, and to be continued because we still have a few more episodes to discuss.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Ken.